how am I going to fit 2 hours into my day to do this while I'm trying to wrap up another job and start another job? Like, how can I spend this much time when I'm not being paid for this? You cannot be going and spending 2 hours with each and every sub to price a job. You're taking a half a week or a week out of your year that you depend on making money to help bid a job that you may not get. Welcome to another Midweek Modern Craftsman. Hope everyone is having a good week. I'm a little bit tired this week. Can't lie. So, I have an existing customer, return customer, who is an attorney, and he also owns some commercial real estate. So I've worked on, so I started working with him through my plumber. My plumber has been his plumber for years, and he needed some work done on his house. I did some work on his house, and then he needed some work done on a property that he rents out. It's pretty close to me, but he rents it out to um, a healthcare company. So he asked me if I could do some work there, which I do a little bit. It's usually quick stuff, but he needed a utility room essentially waterproofed. And I knew I couldn't get in there until like 6 o'clock. And I just, so I'm working in there from like 6 till midnight or so. Last night was a little bit earlier, and I priced it with like an inflated rate, and I spelled that out, budgeted that, hey, this is like more than my normal rate. So it's decent money, but I still, coming from the residential world and coming that this is a residential customer, I feel like I could probably get twice what I'm charging for this job. If somebody else had to go in after hours and do this. But I don't know. I like, my residential rate is different. And even though it's after hours and everything else, I like, for the scope of the work to charge twice what I'm charging, I feel like I would be taking advantage of somebody. Um, Maybe that's not the right move from a business perspective. I had trouble when I was, it's the same as always. I basically created a budget, established a budget, and I'm like, this is how long it's going to take. This is how much the materials are. Don't know. There's a couple of unforeseens what I'm going to run into. It doesn't include this, yada, yada, yada. So I'll make good money on it, but I'm still, in the back of my head, I'm like, if somebody else had to do this and it was from 6 till midnight or whatever the hours you want to work. In my younger days, I probably just worked this straight through till the morning, but I can't do that anymore. Um, they probably would have charged a lot more, but I don't know. Again, just coming from like the return customer perspective, and being that it's like a residential customer, I feel like my numbers are off, and that I could probably get a lot more. But like, looking at the scope of work to charge 2x, I don't feel like it would have been right. So I'm a little bit tired, working some odd hours. By the time I get home, it takes me a little bit of time to unwind. Um, and then pretty much getting up at the same time as normal and getting my day started, because it's not a long enough job where I've like switched to night hours. I'm still on my normal body clock. Um, so I'm just a bit tired from that, but I'd be curious as to what you guys think in my situation. I'm not a commercial contractor, but I know that a commercial contractor would be way more for this. But what would you do? I feel like I'm taking into account, it's still, I'm taking into where it's like I'm making my day rate. I'm gonna hustle for 3-4 days and make a decent bit of extra money. Would you capitalize on that and go straight like emergency or after hours commercial rate, or would you take into consideration that it's a return customer from the residential world, trying to help them out? um I don't know. I know. I don't know. Nice customer. I think that comes into it. If they were a pain in my ass, I probably go straight commercial rate. Just be like, nope, this is what it is. If not, you can hire somebody else. So I do have a heart. I don't always stick to my guns. And like I said, I'll make money on this, but I missed two softball games. I missed Tilly at a game, and then Selby at a game yesterday, which I was super bummed. Like going into work at 5:30, and then missing dinner time and bedtime and softball. I didn't really account for in this. I mean, it's give and take. I don't make a habit of work. I never work weekends. I generally don't work nights, so it happens a few times a year. Maybe I'm overthinking it. What else have I been up to? So I have some pre-con projects signed up that I have been developing pricing, scope of work for, budgeting, meeting with subs. So at last midweek was developing that scope of work, um, developing the line item budget, and getting all that into place so I can start populating that spreadsheet and filling out my numbers. Um, so the next thing for me, sorry, I have a hair hanging from my hat. The next thing for me is to get a hold of my subcontractors and start getting my pricing for my subs. So I treat my subs the same way that I want to be doing work, where I'm going to budget and account for a certain amount of work for them. I don't want them to put money on top of the job just to cover their ass, and I also don't want them losing money. So the agreement is pretty much the same as mine. I'm going to help you develop a scope of work. If you need help developing a schedule, how are you going to fit into the mix? And then what does that price look like for given or said scope of work? If the project deviates from that and it's something that you feel is costing you a lot of money, we'll go and essentially it'll be a change order, or hey, the scope of work has changed. This is what we accounted for. This is how it is. So a lot of people, I feel like, excuse me, real quickly. A lot of people with cost plus T&M type work, whatever your setup may be, lump sum, obviously, um, they're having their subs stick to a number. So it's like, okay, well, my call, I'm not sure of the scope of work. I'm not sure what the job price is going to be. I don't know how to quote this, but then I'm making my subs quote it and stick to that number. Well, you underbid it. Well, you didn't account for that. Sorry. Learn next time. I'll get you on the next one. I appreciate it. Like, I don't want it to be that way. I want my subs to put in the effort up front, do their due diligence, provide me with a really accurate scope, a line item budget, and really spend the time towards developing the scope. So when things aren't the same, we have that leg to stand on. So I approach my relationship with my subs and my pricing with the subs the same way that I do this, where it's like, hey, we're looking at it like this, but if it's different, it's different. We don't know that. Obviously, if there's things that they're leaving out because it's an error or an omission, that's on them. That's on me. When I do that, we can have a conversation as to how to approach it. I don't want them just losing money for the sake of losing money. But if it's something that we just couldn't account for that we've run into, I don't expect my subs to eat that cost. I understand that we're creating numbers based on a lot of hypotheticals, and I want them to have the same, and I'll call it a luxury even though I don't believe it's a luxury. I just feel like it's the way that we should be doing work. But I want them to have that same freedom that I have, that they make money, that if they're working they make money just like most other people. If you're working, you should make money. My subs employees are making money when they work. Why should the owner of the company risk making money or not make money when his employees are working? That's our industry, and I don't agree with it. So I try and do things a little bit differently. Um, so the next step for me again is I'm going to develop this scope of work. I'm going to pass that on to my sub trades. I'm going to use my mason for example because I met with him last week on this project. Um, I gave him the construction documents. I haven't felt that they're super comprehensive or super complete. So I had the conversation with him about what my concerns are, how I want to approach this, how I want to develop the scope, how I'm being paid at this point to develop the scope. Everything's out there. Information, the job, when can you meet out there? So one thing that I want to note when meeting with subs that I've found that has helped over the years, because I didn't always do this, where I have a bigger project where I have multiple subs coming on, right? Do they need to see the site? There's sometimes they don't. Seeing the site may or may not help them. But if they want to see the site, I want to make sure that I can get them to the site. I believe my mason could price this job from Google Earth and some pictures of the back of the house and the plans and develop a scope of work. But he wants to see the site, um, which I think is an ideal situation. The one thing I want to note when you do that, and I've done this times when I met designers where they're looking to pick a contractor and you have your team meet and it's all one day and there's a dozen people on site, a dozen conversations. I can't keep ahead of my subs. I'm meeting with the customer, they're meeting with the customer, the designer's there. It just creates chaos and confusion. And I don't feel that it's adequate to properly gauge what goes into a project. So I prefer to try and find a few days that will work, pick a few days on the calendar, and then line subs up for those days. So I'm ideally creating multiple meetings in a day because I'm charging my customers to go out and meet with these subs and price this project. So I'm not trying to make individual trips. Sometimes I have to, and I take that into account with how I'm pricing for how I'm um, compiling and tracking my cost for a customer. But ideally, there's a few days that work, and I schedule my subs for those days. I do my best not to overlap subs because I want to be able to have a sub there, not have any distractions, meet with the sub, discuss the scope of work, have the sub meet the customer if the customer's there, answer any questions, and start developing that trust and that rapport. If I have two subs on the job and I provide them with scopes of work and then they have questions for me and I'm pulled in this direction, I'm pulled in that direction, there's just things that are going to be left out. Mistakes are going to be made. I would rather devote the time to each sub. So I will, just like if you were scheduling a meeting in person, I'm going to schedule the meeting. I'm going to give myself a buffer so that I can meet with the subs. There's some wiggle room there that I'm not trying to wrap up a meeting and get out of a meeting with one sub to get to the next. So a little bit of downtime for me, but I make sure that the subs have their best chance to give me the most accurate pricing as possible. So that's one thing that I've learned is really important to me. Super convenient to be able to meet 6 subs on a job all at once and bang it out in a couple hours. But does that lead to the most accurate and best development of scope? And pricing and schedule? I don't think so. So I'd rather spend a little bit more time up front. And it takes more time, but I feel that it gives the customers a better idea of who they're working with. They get better interactions with the subs. I get better interactions with the subs, and we are able to get more accurate information from everyone. So this past week, um, I met my mason out on the job, so I sent him the plans. He was like, "Hey, can I get out to see the job in person?" I It was somewhat last minute, and I had an hour and a half of free time, so I ended up meeting him out there at the end of the day. So unfortunately, no other subs. I had to drive out there, meet for this sub, but that's okay. This is a big number on this job, so I meet him out there. End of the day, last minute meeting. Just us again. A little bit of inefficiency there for that, but still, one-on-one meeting, customers there. Mason gets to meet the customer. We discuss how I'm approaching this job, how I'm bidding this job, issues with the plans, what needs to be changed on the plans for submittals, and then how to develop the scope of work and proposal for this job to ensure that I'm protected, that he's protected. So everything that could come up, right? Hey, we are going to put 2x10s on the apron so that when we get uh, a concrete buggy in here, it's not going to create any issues. The fence has to be taken down because we won't be able to get through that gate. Things that I may or may not have accounted for beforehand. We'll put plywood down on the asphalt. If this is happening in the summer, I don't know what the sub base is like on the asphalt. Make sure that you have something in there to protect you for getting things in and out of this driveway. Um, Constraints with grade, constraints with existing conditions. Where are we going to store equipment? Where can we put the soil until it gets pulled off site? All things that I may or may not have considered, but I also don't know how to quantify. So these are things that I'm shedding light on, that my mason's shedding light on. If the customer's there at that point, listen to the conversation, fine. If they're not, I want them to interact at some point. Um, but then, like, I feel my mason could have done all of this through pictures and through what I gauged as important information that I provided him with. But him getting onto the job is essentially forcing us to devote the necessary time to this. If he's looking at pictures and he's at his computer and he can smell dinner getting ready in the other room, or he's getting a phone call or something came up on his computer, like, there's distractions. If you are setting time aside to go and meet with somebody at a job site, you're going to be focused on what you're meeting for. It's going to get done. It's going to be accurate, and it's forcing you to spend the time to do this. If I set up a time to do something a specific day, it's going to get done. If I say, oh, I'll do it when I have 15 spare minutes, I'm going to push that off. And then I'm probably not going to devote 110% to that. So again, I believe that my Mason could have done this off site, but scheduling a time to meet him there creates accountability for both of us to get this done and to really focus on this. Like, we didn't go inside the house, we walked around the backyard, we looked at the plants in the backyard. We could have done that anywhere, but why not meet at the job site? If you're going to come to his office, if you're going to come to my house, if you're going to meet me at another job, let's just meet at the job site where the job's going to take place. You'll get to see the area. You'll get to see if parking is weird. You'll get to see how far off the main roads, if there's any access issues, how far from your normal commute it is. If there's you'll know where the closest supplier is. All that stuff that just comes into account is going to create the most accurate pricing for you. Remember, I'm establishing a budget, and then my job is to manage that budget. So it's not necessarily even a matter of getting paid. It's a matter of creating a budget that I can adhere to and be able to execute the scope of work as the customer wants and try and maintain that budget and maintain that schedule. So all of that comes into account. And the better I can maintain a schedule and maintain a budget based on the initial and preliminary scope of work that we provided in our proposal, the more successful I am, the better experience the customer has. Um, so that's the goal with getting these subs here. Um, Having my mason on site and sitting down and speaking to him and seeing what the existing conditions look like, there's things that came up that may or may not have come up if we had just looked um, from photographs, from the plans that I sent him, from the survey that I sent him. So he also recommended, right, like, for what I charge you for waterproofing on this job, I think based on how the site is, where the water table in this area, I think that we should hire a separate company to come in and do the waterproofing. So that's something that may or may not have been included or communicated adequately just based off a scope of work pricing without being to the job. He was like, there's obvious, like, there's not a lot of impervious here. Where's the water going to shed? Let's protect ourselves. Go with this. It's warranted rather than me do it. I can do it. I think this is a better shot. Um, hey, the existing basement's finished. Rather than me saw cut through, let's get a separate job to saw cut through so that you don't make a mess. Again, things that may or may not have come up, but it was quick and easy. Gave me the names of places. No back and forth. Makes pricing things so much easier. Another thing at this point is looking at the plans and having the customer there for the conversation of why these plans are going to create some inefficiencies and an expensive foundation. So this is not me submitting a proposal and just expecting the customer to understand this. The customer was there witnessing the conversation between me and the mason about why this is a challenging design. And it appears at glance to be a simple addition. It's not very big, but there's certain constraints as far as the differing slab heights, um, how we're tying into an existing house, how there's a slab on grade, how they want an 8-foot basement, how we're tying into the existing slab height. Once we excavate the first bit of the foundation, and then we have to do the second part of the footing, how we're going to tie them in. Now it's disturbed soil. We're probably going to have to put a sonotube under there. All this stuff that's going through his head that we're trying to work through off the cuff that the customer, even if they don't understand the language, they understand the thought that's going into it. And they understand, hey, there's a lot more to this than what appears on the plan. So now when I go to submit that proposal, or when I followed up with the customer yesterday that, hey, looking at numbers for this foundation, probably twice what I thought it would cost because of this, 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 and this. You were there for that conversation. If you don't understand that, um, let's hop on a phone call, understand what all of this means on paper. It also gave me an opportunity right there on the spot to say, if we don't do this, and this is going to really eat into our budget, what are the options? A, B, and C. A being the most expensive, B being the middle, and then C being the least expensive option. What are they? What percentages of cost do we think that's going to be? And do you think that that's worth it at the end of the day? So we start value engineering this project during the site meeting. Customer may not be there to have another plan in the back of the pocket. Now, I'm not going to have my sub at this point um, develop pricing for all of that. We're going to develop the pricing for what's on the plan. And if this is killing the budget, at that point, I already followed up with my Mason. Hey, at this point, before you do any more work, that this is going to be less money, let's submit it as is. If they're fine, I know that this is going to put us over budget. If they're fine with it, then let's not change anything. But if they're like, hey, this is too much, let's try and reduce. What are the options to reduce? At that point, I'll have my Mason do more work and come up with this value engineering and price this a separate way. But I don't want him to do that yet. So all of these conversations are being had. The customer's there. I'm there. This wouldn't, it would take a lot longer for us to get to the point where we are if we hadn't met on site. And then also, I would have to do a much, I would have to be more on top of communicating this to the customer and ensuring that they understand what we're trying to do and why there are issues with what we're trying to do. Like we already started to develop that trust and that rapport and explain to the customer in person on his job what our concerns may be so that when the pricing comes back and it's reflective of that, I don't have to then explain at that point where it's like, well, you were here and you didn't understand any of that. It just makes the conversation that much easier. So this is why I prefer to have this conversation on site. And again, my Mason wanted to do that. And I do think that he probably could have been somewhat accurate. But I think that the hour and a half, the 2 hours that we took out of our day to go do that has probably saved us a lot more time and energy on the back end. We were able to put our heads together, brainstorm, and sort out these issues. Um, I think the tough part for a lot of people in our industry, especially the small owner operators like me, or like a lot of you who listen to this, how am I going to fit 2 hours into my day to do this while I'm trying to wrap up another job and start another job? And now I'm just trying to put numbers together. Like, how can I spend this much time when I'm not being paid for this? And that's where you need to try and find a way to get paid for this realistically. Like, if I was just giving a budget, a napkin number for an estimate, sure, send it over to my Mason. Give me a gut number on this. Okay, take 10, 15 minutes. Here's the scope. This is what it's going to be. Give me a range of numbers. That's fine. But if you're an owner operator, you cannot be going and spending 2 hours with each and every sub to price a job. You're taking a half a week or a week out of your um year that you depend on making money to help bid a job that you may not get. So that's why my pre-construction is basically selling a pre-construction service to customers to hire us to develop the scope, to whether we are handling design or not, we're going to help address the design and move the design forward with regard to how we operate, what our subs do, what team we have on staff, what the budget is. So we're working with designers, we're working with draftsmen, kitchen designer, interior designer, architect, engineer, whatever it may be, to help develop this project into permitting, so contracting and permitting. And again, bigger companies have the overhead and do enough sales volume and revenue in a year to be able to offset the costs of, hey, I'm going to throw somebody on estimating all of our projects, meeting with subs for all of this stuff. I don't have the ability, like if I put that in my overhead and I paid somebody to do that, like it would eat into so much of my profit and revenue in a year. I just don't want to have to absorb that cost. Um, so I keep that separate and I charge my rate to be able to develop the pre-construction, the estimating, the schedule, the budget, and develop everything in order to get to contracts and permitting for customers. Not everyone wants to sign up for that. That's absolutely fine. If you want to hire us to do a job, we need that in place beforehand. So that's really the only way to hire us, unless it's like a quick job where I can say, hey, it's going to be X amount. But if you're looking to do a larger project with us, this is just part of it. And there's no way to get around that. That's what has to be done. So if I were set up differently, sure, maybe I would price stuff like this for free. And the relationships with subs would be different, and I wouldn't be so concerned with wasting their time bidding a couple different jobs when I know I'm going to throw them 6 jobs a year. But I'm not. I'm going to throw them 1 or 2 jobs a year, 3 or 4 jobs a year. And I don't want them to have to price out 20 jobs with me to get those 2, 3, 4 jobs. It just doesn't make sense. Um, so the risk is not worth the reward, or the juice is not worth the squeeze for subcontractors with the size of and scale of company I am. So this is how I protect my subs. This is how I protect myself. The chances of me executing this contract is high when I do my pre-construction and when I work with customers, because I'm managing the budget from day one. Like when all these numbers started coming in for this project, I'm not through my line item. I don't have this budgeting completed, but I'm looking at numbers and there's things coming in higher than what I anticipated. So yesterday I reached out to the customer and was like, hey, with what we have designed, with what we have in place for the kitchen right now, for the site work, the masonry, the upfront permitting and inspection process of the way that this is designed, we're going to be over budget. And I'm not even done assessing all the costs of this project yet. What do you think you want to do about that? Like, here are some options. I think that we could save 30 grand here. I think that we could reduce this and save 30 grand here. But I want to, as soon as I know that, and I had an idea of where things should be beforehand, as soon as I see that going over budget, I want to disclose that to the customer. So that I don't want to continue down this road and spend another 2 weeks and then submit them this whole package where it's like, oh my God, you're $100,000 over. When were you anticipating telling us? There's no way we want to put that much into this house. Now we need to redesign everything. I'd rather figure out what the options are beforehand, and what big numbers and what options we have to adjust the cost or the scope of this project at this point. And if they want to go that route, great. If they don't want to, they don't. But at least we're working to their program and we're keeping them in the loop as much as possible. I don't want to be over, but I don't want to give people an idea of what costs are and have it be low, and then during construction have to say this is more, this is more, this is more. I want to account for somewhat of a worst case scenario and ensure that we have a backup plan in place. And this is the same way that I advocate this to my subcontractors, so that I'm on the same page as the architect, the designer, my subs, myself, and the customer. I want everyone to be on the same page. I don't want to continue to spend money for a project that we may not be able to hit the numbers on, but I didn't know that we wouldn't hit the numbers until we really start digging into this, until my subs are coming out and everything else. And I can't kick their tires. I can't have my subs do that when I'm not the type of contractor that throws them 2 dozen leads a year. It it's not fair to do to them. It's not fair um, to have them basically foot that overhead or invest that amount of time in customers of mine who aren't necessarily even their own customers. And I understand that's the way the industry operates and that's the way it's been, but I still, I don't feel that that's the right move. So this is how I'm approaching my RFPs, requests for proposals from my subs. It's not as much just pricing. Like, hey, can you get me a price on this? It's, hey, I want a price on this, but I also want you to help me develop this scope because that's what I'm hired to do. If they need to get paid for that, I'll have that conversation. Generally, with my subs, being that I'm not having them just price jobs left and right. By the time they come onto a job, I have some sort of contract in place. So usually they aren't looking for compensation, but they're helping me develop the scope. So like the request for proposal is more than just a request for pricing. It's me asking them to put the time into this project so that we have the best opportunity to be successful in this project. And I wouldn't be able to do the heavy lifting of the actual job without them. I also wouldn't be able to do this pre-construction without them. So if they need compensation, if they need work on my end, I need to account for that. I need to budget for that. And that's to me what creates a successful project. At the end of the day, everything that we're doing now may or may not be accurate. The job may go according to plan. Everything that we budget for and account for may actually be the case once we start construction. It also may not be. But doing this work up front and this due diligence and creating this scope and creating this budget and the schedule and everything else, um, that's giving us a leg to stand on when the project doesn't go according to plan. And now we know the numbers and we know the schedule and we know what we accounted for. So we know how it's going to be different at that point. So we can go to the customer with options. We can go to the customer as soon as we see things not going according to how we anticipated, which means budget changes, schedule changes. So immediately we can start addressing these concerns and bring the customer and their program and their schedule and their timeline and their needs and their financial capacity into the conversation from the get-go rather than a month, 2 months into the job, closing the job out. Here's all your extras that you owe me. So it's really a play-by-play. We're in it from the beginning, and we are adapting live. All of this is live, and that's how I manage a budget. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be on budget. It doesn't mean that our jobs are going to go according to the scope that we have on paper, but we can manage the budget accordingly. We can manage the project accordingly to figure out which direction we want to go. So that's where I stand with this week's midweek. It's how I navigate that subcontractor aspect of the pricing. Maybe next week I'll go into how I develop my pricing for the jobs, like from the things that I'm going to self perform, and how I protect myself if if I can't self perform them, right? Where it's like, hey, I intended on self performing this, but now I have to go the sub route. How am I ensuring that I can cover myself on that? So maybe next week I'll go into a bit of pricing my self performing. I'm going to make some notes so I remember. Um, and then my management to ensure that whatever route this job goes, we have some money allocated to the budget to cover meeting the program of the customer and the job and what it really needs of us at that point in the project. All right, guys and girls, I hope that you enjoyed this week. I'm sorting through emails today too. It looks like I have, let's see right now, one, two, three, four emails in my inbox looking to set up some consulting calls for business. I'm around this week and the beginning of next week. By the time this comes out, this will all probably be past. But that brings us to probably by the time you hear this, it's going to be mid to later of May. So I'll have a little bit more time. A lot of times I'm scheduling those calls for Tuesdays beginning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I try and do them before lunchtime. If that time doesn't work for you, a lot of times I can scoop my schedule around to fit something in if there's like an off time or another day of the week that works for you. I can do that. But shoot me an email, tyler@trghomeconcepts.com, and I can explain to you what that looks like and how to get them booked up. Again, I'm usually not scheduling anything for more than a week or two in advance, so I don't put too much on my plate. But if you're interested in a consulting call, or you have questions, or how I operate my business, shoot me an email, tyler@trghomeconcepts.com, and I get you all the information as to what that looks like and how I go about that process. In the meantime, I will catch you all next week. Thanks.